Each year, thousands of criminal cases are heard in courts around Australia. Here, some of the most serious crimes are heard before judge and jury. This is where justice is done. Now, for the first time in Australia, cameras have been allowed to film a murder trial.
This is not a whodunit trial.
How can that be anything but a reference to the other states?
I might not be allowed to believe in an afterlife, but defection's certainly not here.
Right, all please stand.
On trial is Anthony Evans, a 34-year-old mechanic from Perth, Western Australia. He stands accused of murdering partner Alana Dakin in November 2007.
She was the sort of girl that would stand out in a crowd, and she almost took over when she walked into a room.
Alana was last seen in a Perth bottle shop. 3 hours later, she was dead on her lounge room floor.
It's believed a violent argument broke out between the couple at their Girraween home just after midnight.
You know, you just can't believe it. You just want to be in a dream.
Evans admitted killing Alana.
Basically, I killed her.
But his defence claims he was insane at the time.
Anthony was a chronic schizophrenic.
I will need medical assistance.
He didn't know what the hell he was doing. He didn't know what the hell he should be doing.
The prosecution will argue it was a brutal murder.
By cutting her throat with this knife.
If found guilty, Anthony Evans faces a life sentence.
How say you? Are you guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
September 6, 2010. Day one of the trial in the Supreme Court of Western Australia.
It was a tragedy that, looking back on it, seemed to have a kind of an air of almost inevitability about it.
It was about 6 months before it happened. They met at a bus stop, and Alana was really in a bad way, and he was there sort of like a savior.
Meeting Anthony, he's a very gentle, softly spoken man. He looks like he must be in there for having, stolen a packet of cigarettes from Woolworths. He's not some kind of stereotyped psychotic killer, far from it.
We lost Alana almost 3 years ago. It's been a long time. We just want this trial done and over with, professionally and ethically, and we want to get on with our lives.
We are entrusted with Anthony's life, and I think we all want to have that feeling that when we walk out in 2 weeks' time, whatever the verdict, we'll know there's nothing more we could do. And that's how you live with yourself and move on to the next case.
He's my son. He's still got a life. And if we don't stick behind him, who's gonna?
Anthony's parents, Rod and Sandra Evans, will attend every day of the trial.
Members of the jury, Anthony Thomas Evans is charged that on the
12 jurors have been impanelled. None can be shown on camera.
For the next couple of weeks, can you put a bubble around yourself in respect of this case? Talk about it among yourselves, but not with anybody else. And the same goes for tweeting, Facebook walls and anything else. That is because it is only the verdict of 12 of you that counts. Nobody else's opinion, nobody else's matter.
It's a usual description to describe a judge in part as an umpire, but more particularly the judge's principal role really is to ensure as far as possible that the accused and the state both have a fair trial.
One of the arts of being a barrister is trying to tell a story, make it interesting, and you can only be persuasive if you do that. And I'm a great believer in agreeing as much as you can and being short and punchy and make your points, get in, get out.
My strategy will be to the prosecutor's duty of presenting all the available and reliable and relevant evidence, and arguing the case that the accused intended to cause grievous bodily harm to the victim, which is the intent required to prove the crime of murder.
At the very start of the trial, the defence makes a key admission.
Mr. Edwardson. If Your Honour pleases, before my learned friend opens, I wish to make a formal admission. The accused makes the following admission. It is admitted that on 13 November 2007 at Girraween, Anthony Thomas Evans caused the death of Alana Marie Dakin.
The defence seeks a not guilty verdict due to unsound mind or a conviction of manslaughter.
What Anthony has effectively admitted to is that his actions caused the death of Alana. So the question for the jury to determine is how and why, and it's really the why more than the how.
Mr. Foreman, ladies and gentlemen.
Opening addresses to the jury outline the prosecution and defence cases.
Sometime after midnight and before 3 a.m, on the morning of the 13th of November 2007, Anthony Thomas Evans, the accused man, killed his girlfriend, Alana Marie Dakin, by cutting her throat with this knife. Between 5:30 and 7:20 on that same morning, he confessed to the killing in an audio-visually recorded interview with police that you'll see played during the evidence today. It'll be essentially the first evidence the prosecution presents to you. The prosecution has to prove three things. One of them we've been relieved of proving by the formal admission, but the other two are that the accused caused the death of Alana Dakin unlawfully, and the other is that when he caused her death, he intended to do her some grievous bodily harm. If we prove those two things, along with the fact that the accused man killed Alana Dakin, then we will have proved the crime of murder, and we have to prove those things beyond reasonable doubt. If we prove the fact of the killing and the unlawfulness of the killing, but not that the accused intended to do grievous bodily harm, we will have proved the crime of manslaughter.
The stakes are as high as they can be. If Anthony gets found guilty of murder, he's going to get life imprisonment and he's going to spend a very, very long time in jail. So it's an enormous responsibility, and I don't think you'd do your job properly if you weren't nervous.
This is not a whodunit trial. This is a trial that is all about why Anthony Evans killed Alana Dakin. On face value, this is a tale as old as time. Anthony and Alana met, fell in love, and ended up hurting each other. Anthony's reactions to the volatile relationship between himself and Alana were profoundly influenced by two important factors. The first was that Anthony was, and even after the death, remained completely in love with Alana and motivated by a desire to save her from herself. The second was that Anthony was a chronic schizophrenic. There's always a potential for jurors to be cynical about a person's mental health, and there's a natural reaction, for example, when so much is at stake, for people to think maybe he's banging it on, maybe he's feigning it. That's certainly not the impression I've got.
And I call Bruce Richard Bowers, page 201.
The prosecution calls its first witness, the detective in charge of the investigation.
Now, did you, in the end, interview Mr. Evans on videotape?
I did.
Did that interview begin at about 5:30 in the morning?
Yes.
And did he appear to be intoxicated?
No, he didn't appear to be overly intoxicated to me.
Could you smell alcohol on him?
No, I couldn't.
Did he appear to be overly tired?
It was early in the morning, but no, not overly tired. He did make a comment to me.
And what was that?
He said, if you want to do that, I would request you do it sooner rather than later. That way you'll get the best out of me.
The central evidence in the case is Anthony Evans' police record of interview.
At this stage, Your Honour, I seek to play the interview. I hand it up. It runs, as I say, for approximately 110 minutes, so we're not going to get...
It was recorded just hours after Alana was killed.
Anthony, I'll just let you know now that everything we do and say has been video recorded. Okay. Can you just give us a brief appreciation of your relationship with Alana?
We're engaged to be married.
Mm-hmm.
She's the first and only person I'll ever be in love with. And,
okay.
Basically, I killed her. Leading up to the actual process of the killing, I will need medical assistance on trying to understand that. She's been the aggressor in the relationship, and she won't take no for an answer, and when she gets violent, I try to walk away, and she's she's a very angry girl, and
The video is what tells you everything you need to know as a jury about the accused, how he was talking, thinking, behaving around about the time of the incident. And from my perspective, I think it very much supports our contention that he wasn't of sound mind. But obviously the prosecution, as they said in their opening, will say otherwise. But it's probably the most crucial piece of evidence in the whole trial, quite frankly.
The domestic violence was getting out of hand, and her answer to everything was just to sell everything and buy a camper van and head off into the sunset, as long as there was a bottle shop on the way, I guess, which I sympathised with her.
The prosecution case is so centred on the interview. I mean, I watched it within months of the events, and I've watched it again since, and each time I've watched it, I've got the personal impression that he was not psychotically thought disordered, that he was describing accurately and reliably events for which he is criminally responsible.
I ended up with a knife in my hand, but I can't remember the exact reasons for grabbing the knife, probably because usually she grabs the knife, but for this time I grabbed it. I admit I grabbed it, and there was no intention to stab her or anything. But then in the heat of the moment it became clear to me that I had some kind of, it was not like a thought to stab her, it was more like a challenge, not by me but by her. Do it then. And then it became egotistic, drunk, emotional, egotistical, knife in the hand, where's this going? And the fact that there's just so much trouble been in our relationship, and then she wanted the knife, and I said, no, I'm not giving you the knife. And then she stuck her hand out and said, I want to die, cut my arm. I said, no, I'm fucking cutting your arm. Well, I put the knife away, and I put the knife away, and then she said, I want the knife, I want the knife. And I can't remember the lead up to it, but at one point she's gone like that, and I've just slashed her arm there, and it opened up so much that I could see all the tendons, and in shock I've just thrown the knife on the ground, grabbed her, pulled her down, grabbed the rug, put it on her arm, grabbed the pillows, put the pillows on her. She's going, what are you doing, what are you doing? And the blood was just gushing out of this.
I'll have to say it's probably one of the most unique interviews I've ever done in my career. His graphic detail of the events was somewhat matter of fact, as if he was making a cup of tea in many of the comments he was making. I think I'd be accurate by saying it was relatively cold, it was somewhat shocking, and many of the things I heard, I was considering to myself, how could a human being do this to another person?
And at this particular point we started arguing over who was the stronger person. And she said, oh, I'm the stronger person. I said, I'm sick of this shit, Lana, you're not the stronger person. You've got to stop fucking getting us into this shit. I am, you're not, I am, you're not. And then I just remember grabbing the knife and I sliced her neck box.
The most challenging aspect of this case is trying to convey to the jury that he was psychotic at the time of the killing. And the reason it's difficult in this case is that the interview has this, he demonstrates a sort of blunted expression. He shows no real emotion when he's describing the circumstances of the killing.
And when you pushed the knife in, was it going away from you?
Yeah, sort of like filleting, yeah.
So across from here to there?
That way.
Yeah. So from her neck first?
You'll cross this part, I guess.
Yeah. So
I really don't know why I did it. I just got confused and anger, combination of anger and confusion. So.
The court hears all 2 hours of Evans' version of the night's events.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards.
In cross-examination, the defence focuses on Evans' mental state after the killing.
Now, the interview itself when it was conducted was, can I suggest, of an investigation nature, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, when you commenced the interview, did you have any knowledge at all of him, in the sense of him having received, one way or another, extensive psychiatric treatment over an extended period of time?
No, I had no understanding of the accused and I'd never met him prior.
Would you agree with the description that he was a bit of a rambling conversationalist from beginning to end?
I wouldn't say rambling conversationalist, but it was an investigative interview.
Yes.
And I did want to focus on particular points, and at stages it was difficult to keep the accused on track.
Would it be fair to say that although there might have been some sort of slurring, predominantly there was a sort of a blunted emotional expression from beginning to end, no matter what topic he was discussing?
Yes, I'd agree with that.
Did you, or to your knowledge, did any police officer present him to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a medical practitioner to evaluate his mental state?
No. In the interview, it actually mentions that I wish I could join her, or gives reference to joining the deceased.
Yes.
So when he was lodged at the police lockup, I actually escorted Mr Evans personally, yes, and I gave them a briefing that there's possibly some health issues at play there.
Yes, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a long day when you have nothing to do but watch the screen. I'm well aware of that.
I think day one for a jury is just an overwhelming day of what they've had to sit there and listen to evidence about knives being slashed and slashed like a filleting a fish and all these sorts of things. I think there's just a lot of loose and random thoughts likely to be in the jury's mind, but I certainly would expect the jury at this point would at least have some doubts about his sanity, and if that's where we've got them to, then we'd be pretty happy with that.
A lot of the witnesses tomorrow will be sort of routine pieces in the puzzle. The evidence of the previous domestic violence incidents will be raised tomorrow. Some witnesses whose evidence per se is not contentious, but the interpretation of it is highly contentious, such as Bruce with the interview. The interview is the key document in the trial.
Alana's parents decide not to attend much of the trial. They have custody of her 7-year-old son from a previous relationship.
He's our little ray of sunshine.
Close friend Glynis Mayton attends on their behalf.
I'll take notes all the time just to make sure,
Well, we really appreciate that because, our situation and our feelings towards actually attending. We prefer not to attend this particular because we don't need to view or listen to the goriness.
No, I wouldn't want you to either,
Day 2. Overnight, the defence team discovers potentially damaging material has been published on the internet.
This was a retrial, but there was a previous trial that the accused man, Mr Evans, had been sentenced, and articles about the sentencing itself, and then about the appeal. So we're concerned that if any jurors got onto that side, they will have full knowledge now, not only that this was a retrial, but what happened at sentencing and what happened in the initial trial. So we've asked His Honour to sit at 9:30 this morning to deal with this in the absence of the jury, to see whether we can have some directions that can overcome this, or possibly even abort the trial.
The retrial happened because essentially the Court of Appeal found that the judge made several important errors in the way in which she directed the jury they could use the evidence that was led at trial, and also because of the nature of some of the evidence that was led at trial.
Justice McKechnie examines the offending website.
Oh, that's helpful. Accused murder to be retried.
Yes.
The jury has not been told this is a retrial for fear of prejudicing Evans' case.
Out of an abundance of caution, it's my submission, or our submission I should say, that a further strong and clear direction from Your Honour is paramount in the circumstances.
Justice McKechnie gives special directions to the jury.
Yesterday morning, before the trial started, I gave you instructions concerning not conducting internet searches. Something has arisen which causes me to reinforce those directions and explain again why this is so. If jurors conduct searches, then neither counsel can deal with it. They can deal with evidence in court, but if they don't know about it because you've done it privately, they simply have no opportunity, and so it is unfair on the parties. Material on the net these days is pervasive. Everything gets reported. But it's a mistake to think that everything is accurate. And in some of the coverage I have seen, there are, in fact, errors. Now, I can confirm to you that this is a retrial. There has been a trial, and this is a separate trial. The verdict in that trial was set aside by a unanimous Court of Appeal. So then anything that has gone before is simply irrelevant to your task, which is to find the facts on this case. We'll now continue the trial, and if the witness could be recalled.
An aborted trial is averted. Now the prosecution calls the first police officer who attended the crime scene.
What did you do when you got there?
Inside the house, I saw a lady inside with two St John's ambulance officers. I've asked the lady to leave the premises.
Did you later find out that that lady's name was Sandra Evans?
I did know it was Sandra Evans from
I beg your
when I
pardon.
first saw her, yeah.
And what did you do there?
Well, basically, I've also asked the St John's guys to leave. As the first officer left, he said to me that he made the comment, she's dead.
What did you do after you heard that?
There's a hallway as you enter the premises, and the room was pretty much on the right as you walked in.
Okay, much as we see on the plan?
Yep.
And what did you see when you looked into that room?
The body of a female laying on her back.
Western Australia's chief forensic pathologist gives evidence about the wounds that caused Alana's death.
Now, for the purposes of this case, an autopsy was performed on the body of the deceased lady, Alana Marie Dakin.
Yes, that's right.
Now, that was not performed by you, but by your former colleague, Dr. Margolius,
yes,
who recently passed away.
Yes.
All right. What cause of death did she report?
She said the cause of death was a penetrating wound to the neck.
Very well.
The prosecution decides against showing any crime scene images of Alana's body.
Photographs of the injuries included some extremely graphic, horrible images. And you don't want to subject a jury to that unless you absolutely have to. But if you can do it in a schematic way, then it's better to do it that way. It also made them much clearer.
The first knife wound penetrated Alana's right chest, exiting in the armpit.
Across the front of the shoulder, through the muscle.
The second knife wound was fatal.
It's this injury which is in fact the most important in terms of causing death, because here, of course, you have the jugular vein and the carotid artery, the main vein and artery in the neck on the left side, and one of those was cut. The left jugular vein was cut.
But you've made the point that it is, in essence, two separate wounds joined up.
Yes, there's a penetrating component towards that right side, and then the incised slicing type component towards the left side.
Would the penetrating wound have been fatal?
No, not at all. I wouldn't expect so. It's simply tunnelled beneath the skin through the muscle and the fat. It hasn't of itself cut any major blood vessels, no arteries, no veins.
The incised part of the wound, how quickly fatal would that wound have been?
It's hard to say, but you would normally expect just a few minutes, maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes.
And the knife that you have on the table there, Exhibit E, would that be capable of inflicting a wound of that type?
Yes, I think so. It's sharp enough at the point.
Now I'll move to a different area, if I can, and that is to do with some toxicology results that were found on examination of blood samples taken from both the accused and deceased.
Blood tests reveal whether Anthony and Alana were drug or alcohol affected. Taken hours after the killing, Anthony's sample is less reliable.
You know, on the average level, he could have, 9 hours previously, been at 0.135. Of course, he could have been less than that. He could have been 0.
Exactly. And if I can turn then to the Chemistry Centre report in relation to Alana Dakin, which is rather more detailed and more findings to report on.
Alana's blood sample is far more revealing.
It was measured at 0.259%, and the commonly accepted fatal level is 0.4.
Right.
So it's creeping up quite high.
The court hears about Alana's troubled life in a statement from her mother, Rose.
I'm the natural mother of Alana Marie Dakin. She is my only child. I gave birth to Alana on 6 November 1974 at Inuvik General Hospital in Canada. Alana had problems with alcohol. I would call her an alcoholic. I am also aware that Alana had problems with prescription medication, including Valium. When Alana was sober, she was a really a lovely person.
She once said to me, sometimes I feel like two people. There's the really good Alana, and then there's the really sad and bad Alana. At that time, I couldn't understand, but years later, I did realize that she was suffering from depression. And around the time that we found out about her real father, Peter, committing suicide, she was really suffering from depression. She was getting help for it. And gradually, she started getting medication. But it just seemed like the medication was getting more and more and more, and she seemed to be taking a lot of pills, and
But I think that we always looked at alcohol as being the problem that she had.
And she could just have a few drinks, and she'd be like really drunk, with the Valium.
It would take over her.
Yeah,
it would consume her to the extent that she'd become the aggressor from time to time, because she needed to continue down that road.
The prosecution argues the killing can be explained by the couple's dysfunctional relationship, not by Evans' insanity. The turbulent relationship now becomes the prosecution's key focus.
We think the history of domestic violence is an essential part of the background against which the events of the killing itself have to be understood, and that the death was the culmination of a violently dysfunctional relationship in which the deceased was alleged to have been the initiator of much of the violence, although she was the ultimate victim of the final violence.
3 weeks before the killing, domestic violence between Anthony and Alana escalated. Police attended a number of incidents at the couple's home.
Now, when you first saw Alana Dakin, what did you notice about her?
She had bruising and swelling to the left side of her face, and she was handcuffed to the front of her body.
And what was her demeanour?
She was intoxicated.
Was she cooperative with you or other officers?
No, not at all.
Now, did you speak to Anthony Evans on that occasion?
I did, yes. I placed him under arrest and conveyed him back to Warwick Police Station, where he took part in a video record of interview.
And during the course of that interview, did he say anything to you about the injuries that you'd seen on Alana Dakin?
He claimed it was self-defence, that she was holding a knife, and to overcome her, he punched her several times to the side of her face to get her to drop the knife.
Did you charge anyone with anything?
No, we didn't.
Did you take any other action in relation to either Anthony Evans or Alana Dakin?
We issued Alana with a 24-hour police order to keep her away from the address and away from Anthony.
All right.
Police were called to a second incident a few days later.
Before you got into the house, did you have any conversation with Mr. Evans?
Yes, I did. And he told me that they'd both been drinking, they had an argument, that she pulled a knife. He had to knock the knife out of her hand. He thought he might have broken her hand.
And so when you went into the house, what were you alert to do?
Well, we were obviously cautious because we were advised that there may have been knives used. And we found Alana in one of the bedrooms on the floor. I noticed her hand was quite swollen.
And you became aware that Ms. Dakin was taken to hospital and treated there?
Yes.
All right. And you did speak to her?
Yes, I did.
She declined to make any complaint, and no formal interviewing was done of Mr. Evans, and no charges were laid against any person as a result?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Marino.
Alcohol was consumed, violence broke out, police were called. Well, when you're seeing instances of that magnitude, you kind of think, well, shit, this is only going to escalate or end up one way. And that was our big fear. But, you know, you kind of wake up in the morning thinking, oh, well, it's daylight. OK, what's going to happen tonight, you know?
The last reported incident took place 2 weeks before the killing.
Did you speak to Anthony Evans in particular?
Yes, I did.
And what was your conversation with him?
Anthony told me what had happened that night, and I gave him considerable advice regarding gaining a violence restraint order and ceasing the relationship. I stressed that obviously the relationship was never going to go anywhere, it was never going to be a positive one, and that it was my advice that they separate and not see each other ever again.
Now, you've told us that Anthony told you what had happened that night. What did he tell you?
He said that Miss Dakin was drinking heavily. She was intoxicated. They had decided to go to Mum and Dad's place to sort it out, and that when they were driving in the car, Miss Dakin tried to take the steering wheel, and he was forced to push her away on several occasions.
What happened then?
We went to Mr. and Mrs. Evans's house, where Alana was in a bedroom downstairs.
And did you personally deal with her while she was there?
I spoke to her for a brief moment, but she was extremely abusive. She had bruising to her face, which appeared to be old injuries. She was extremely intoxicated, and she wanted vodka. She wanted alcohol. She was screaming for vodka.
What ended up happening?
We, after speaking, came to the conclusion that Alana had to be removed from the house, and we presented her with a 72-hour notice, so she couldn't in fact contact the Evanses at all for 72 hours.
What time of the day was it by this stage?
Oh, it was probably 2:30 in the morning. We eventually, I made a phone call and took her to the complainant's address.
And when you say the complainant, that's Jane Mayton?
That's correct, yes, Jane Mayton.
You refer to her as the complainant because she was the person who called the police?
Originally, she was the person who called us, yes.
All right, not because she had particularly anything to complain about in a technical sense. In terms of your personal dealings with Anthony Evans, how would you describe his demeanour?
I found him to be quite an okay person. He understood what I was saying. He was quite personable. He understood that this relationship was at crisis point. So I understood that he was going to seek a violence restraint order.
All right.
In cross-examination, the defence seeks to draw more evidence about Alana's behaviour. It will be used to support a very different argument.
Well, the psychiatric evidence suggests that if he's placed under stress, for example, if he's subjected to some form of domestic violence, that's likely to exacerbate a psychotic episode. In other words, it's more likely in those circumstances that he might be psychotic at the time of the killings. Did she, generally speaking, appear to be quite irrational?
Yes, she was irrational. She was aggressive.
When you say she was aggressive, what do you mean?
Well, when I put her in when we placed her in the back of the police vehicle, she retained her bag. I wanted her bag. I climbed into the back of the police vehicle to take the bag from her, and she spat into my hair and onto my jacket.
Was she restrained at that stage?
No.
Was she subsequently restrained?
No. She had injuries.
Yes.
And we were obviously concerned we wouldn't handcuff her with those injuries.
Alana's best friend, Jane Mayton, is called. The prosecution believes she will help frame the couple's troubled relationship. But the team proceeds with caution. It was Mayton's hearsay evidence that was most contentious in the first trial.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I will give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
The evidence that Jane Mayton gave at the last trial included some very graphic accounts by Alana to her of the way in which she said that the accused had injured her. Now, those things were hearsay evidence. They were the subject of one of the successful grounds of appeal at the first trial.
We had concerns because Jane Mayton was obviously a very close friend of Alana, and the way in which she conducted herself outside of the court on the last occasion made it very clear that she was very protective of Alana and very hostile to Anthony. And we as a defence team were very concerned that she would take any opportunity to present it to her in court to say says things that would be damaging to our case.
And so at this trial, we were careful to tell Jane before she gave evidence that she'd be giving evidence differently this time because of the court's ruling. At the time that you first met Alana, was she a recovering alcoholic?
Yes, she was. She was sober.
And for what proportion of the time that you knew her was she sober?
She was sober the entire time. I knew her until the last few months.
Did she have a very traumatic event, a sexual assault?
Yes, she did.
After which she relapsed?
Yes.
When you first met Anthony and spoke to him, he told you how much he loved her and
yes,
seemed like a big friendly giant, I think, in your words.
Very much so.
Now, on that first occasion that you met Anthony, Alana, I think, had left the room after first introducing you.
Mm-hmm.
And she came back in and Anthony gave her a can of beer?
Yes. Yes, he did.
All right. After having first met Anthony, did you see less of Alana over the ensuing months?
Yes, I did. She kept very much to herself.
And on the occasions that you did see them, how did Anthony seem in his demeanour?
Moody.
Did you notice that Alana was continuing to drink alcohol?
Yes, I most certainly did.
And did you next hear from her on the night of the 29th of October 2007?
Yes, she sent me text messages.
I don't need to go into the detail of what the text messages were, but from their content, did they cause you to go around to 272 Marangaroo Drive? What did you do?
I knocked and knocked. There was no answer. I was starting to get increasingly worried.
All right. Did you then decide to call 000?
Yes, I did.
All right, and ask the police to find out where Alana was?
I knew she was in danger from the tone of the text messages. I called the police. They attended.
Yes.
I understand. Be careful just to answer the question I asked you, Ms Mayton. That's all right. The rule against hearsay is a complicated rule, and lawyers and judges get it wrong from time to time, and so we don't expect lay people who aren't trained in the law to know precisely how to avoid answering a question in such a way as to create an impermissible prejudice. So we kind of had to control Jane's evidence quite tightly to ensure that she didn't make a mistake. And you understood that the police went to the other address, an address in Warwick, found Anthony and Alana there, and later you were contacted by them.
That's right.
And they asked if Alana could come to stay with you.
Yes.
Now, when the police dropped Alana off, did she appear to be intoxicated?
She did a bit, yes.
And did she appear to be injured?
Very much so.
I want you to just tell us what injuries you noticed on her.
I noticed bruising on her face. She had an injury to the top of her head. She had blood matted into her hair and spots of blood on her clothing. Her arm was bandaged.
Now, the following morning, did you take Alana to hospital for her to be treated for the injuries?
Myself and my mother took her to Sir Charles Gardner Hospital to receive treatment.
And among the treatments she received was there some stitches
to the head, and she was advised that she'd need plastic surgery on her hand.
Jane had asked Alana after we brought her back from the hospital, she said, did the police or the hospital take any photographs of your injuries? Because they were extensive. And she says, no, nobody's taken any photos at all. And she said, well, if it's okay with you, I want to take photos of as many things as I can find. And it was used in the last trial.
That evidence at the first trial should never have been admitted before the jury. That's the reason we've got a retrial, and that's the reason why this jury is only going to consider the guilt or innocence of Anthony Evans on admissible evidence rather than prejudicial, inadmissible opinion.
All right. And did you see her again after that?
No. I took her to hospital and that was the last time I saw her.
All right. Thank you, Ms Mayton. That's the evidence.
The defence decides not to cross-examine.
I have to say I breathed a big sigh of relief when it was over. It was we were terrified. She was the one witness we were very worried about, particularly because we didn't want her to cause the trial to abort. And I felt that in the end her evidence really didn't harm our case at all.
But the restrictions on her evidence leaves Jane Mayton feeling the full story of her dead friend is not being told.
Even when I did see her on occasion intoxicated, I never once saw the Alana that they're speaking about in trial. She was just such a kind person, such a kind soul.
There were serious things going on with that relationship, but we couldn't pinpoint it. I was up at Broome at the time. Rose was down for only for a couple of days, basically, and she was a witness to all these incidents. Her daughter lying there, black and blue in the face, you know. And how did this happen, you know? It's horrific.
It was terrible, just terrible.
There's been this, in my opinion, this lean to try and turn it into a domestic violence case, that Anthony's mean, woman basher, blah, 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 and which is not the case. That's not the way he's been brought up. He's been brought up with good values and that. He's got issues that have made life difficult for him as well. I mean, as the time went on, yeah, he was finding the situation harder to cope with.
Day 3. The prosecution now turns to Alana's movements the day before the murder. After the last police intervention, Alana was ordered to stay away from Anthony. She was admitted to a women's refuge.
And can you remember how she appeared physically?
Alana had her arm in a sling.
Now, what are the rules at Zonta in relation to drinking alcohol?
It's classified as a dry house. It does state on the documentation that clients can be asked to leave the accommodation facility, should they do that.
Now, at about 6 o'clock that evening, did Alana approach you?
Alana came to me and stated that she'd consumed a bottle of alcohol.
And how did she seem physically then?
She didn't seem drunk or intoxicated to me, but given that you've had a whole bottle of alcohol, then I would say that yes, she was intoxicated.
Okay. And what did you do?
Basically at that point, I had to advise Alana that the house rules had been broken, that she would be evicted and that I would be making contact with crisis care.
Did Alana provide you with information suggesting she had somewhere to stay?
Alana said that she'd made contact with a friend and that she was going to be picked up by them. So I had a conversation with Alana regarding who that friend was, whether it was male, thinking that she may return to the perpetrator, which is often the case, and so we'd had a discussion about that.
But at the conclusion of that discussion, Alana packed her belongings and left.
That's correct.
And you didn't see where she went or who collected her, if anyone?
No, I just visually saw Alana walk to the end of the driveway and then I had to continue on with my shift and lock the door, and that was the last I saw of her.
The friend Alana called was Anthony Evans.
Yes, I went to this address and picked her up. I'm not exactly sure what the refuge is all about, but she asked me to park at the house next door.
4 hours later, they were recorded arriving at a local bottle shop.
There was a female in the passenger seat and a male in the driver's seat, and I noticed that the female had a broken arm.
And did you notice anything about the male? How would you describe him?
He was quite thin. He had a shaved head, but only like around the sides. He had a bit on the top. He reminded me of an old school bogan, how they used to dress when I was younger.
Okay. Back in the day?
Yeah.
All right. Did you notice anything about what the female was wearing?
She had a lovely black, white and red dress on.
When the lady got out, or at any stage after you first noticed her, did you notice anything else about her that you didn't at first pick up?
She had bruises on the right side of her face.
Did you notice anything about whether she appeared affected by alcohol?
She seemed to be a little bit unsteady, but she definitely wasn't intoxicated. I wouldn't even say she was drunk, because she wasn't slurring her words. She could walk, but she just seemed a little bit shaky on her feet.
Okay, so what did she do?
She actually came up to the section of the bottle shop where the white wines were stored in the fridge.
Was she able to pick out a particular wine?
She couldn't find the one she wanted, and then she actually saw one that she'd drunk before and selected that one.
And what was that one?
Carrington Blush.
Did you buy a bottle of Carrington Blush?
She bought 2.
Okay, and how much did they cost altogether?
Altogether it was $14, $15.
And did you notice anything else about the lady as the transaction was progressing?
When I put the bottles down, she was putting the money on the counter and her hands were shaking a lot.
What was her manner towards you?
Oh, she was lovely. She was very quiet, very quietly spoken, polite.
And did the male come into the store?
No.
Did he communicate with you or her while he was in the car?
When she was looking at the wines in the fridge, he yelled for her to hurry up, and that was it.
Right, it's now 20:52:24 on the counter, and the lady who you served has returned to the car.
These are the last recorded images of Alana. In 3 hours, she will be dead.
And I was the last one of the family to talk to Alana. She called my mobile. It's a little after midnight, and she just sounded like a little distant lost soul, you know. And I said to her, I said, Alana, do you realise what the time is? And she said, it's okay. I said, Alana, at this time, it's not the right time to talk. And I put the phone down. And that's all it was. And, you know, from what I understand, 2 hours later, she was dead.
Anthony's father, Rod Evans, is called to give evidence. He was the first to see Anthony after the killing.
I want to take you now to the early hours of the morning following the Tuesday the 13th of November. Were you asleep at your home on that morning?
Yes.
Did you get a knock on the door?
I did.
And what did you do when you heard the knock?
I got out of bed and went and answered the door, and Anthony was standing there.
What did he tell you the moment you opened the door?
Well, he was upset, he was muttering, and then he said that he thought Alana was dead, but he wasn't making a lot of sense at the time.
What did you do?
Tried to take stock of the situation. By that time, my wife had kind of overheard. She came to the door.
Did Anthony's presentation and what he said to you leave you in a state of some confusion?
Yeah, well, I really didn't know what to do.
All right. Was the upshot that Sandra said that she would go over to the house and you would stay with Anthony?
That's right.
Anthony came inside?
He did.
You gave him a bit of a wide berth because you didn't really quite know what to do?
Well, he sat at the table, and then he made himself a coffee. I just wasn't too sure what the hell to do.
All right. Not long afterwards, Anthony asked to see his brother Wayne?
That's correct.
And you got Wayne up?
Yes.
And he went down, and then you spoke to Sandra on the phone?
Yeah, she just said it doesn't look good.
All right. And very shortly after that, some police officers arrived?
Yes.
And they asked who Anthony was, and he identified himself?
Yes.
They read him his rights and arrested him?
Yes.
All right, Mr Evans, I'm not going to trouble you any further.
Mr Evans, if you could just bear with me briefly. I want to just...
The defence takes the opportunity to draw crucial evidence on Anthony's state of mind.
When Anthony was staying at your house. Now, I just want to very briefly ask you a little bit about the way Anthony presented when he, for the first time, spoke to you, when he said, I think your words were, I think Alana's dead.
Yes.
You also said that he was muttering?
Well, he was just sort of muttering to himself and not sort of speaking clearly, apart from saying, I think Alana's dead, I think Alana's dead. He was either in shock or something, I don't know, but he certainly wasn't thinking clearly or acting clearly.
Before this particular occasion, this dramatic night that you're now describing, have you from time to time observed Anthony saying and doing things which are quite strange?
Yeah, in an earlier period, yeah, he used to have his moments of...
Are you able to give us any idea of what sort of observations along those lines that you've seen?
We went through a period where he claimed he was sort of in touch with the spiritual world, getting messages from the TV, but yeah, he believed he had contact with a greater world, or however you want to put it.
And did that cause you yourself to have him admitted?
Yes.
Do you know when that was?
Oh, it was probably around about July, August of 1999.
Right, and back then when that happened, how did Anthony react to you taking the drastic step of having him admitted?
Well, at that time, once again, not knowing a hell of a lot what to do, I'd contacted relevant experts, if you like. They came and assessed him, and then they said they wanted to get him into hospital and assess him further.
Mm-hmm.
So his reaction to me was, yeah, he felt I'd betrayed him and he wasn't happy with me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Mr. Evans.
And, Your Honour, with that is the case for the prosecution.
After 3 days, the first phase of the prosecution case is over. The team's key aim has been to frame the murder in a context of escalating domestic violence.
The prosecution case is primarily in the video interview. The other witnesses' evidence was of lesser importance, but just little pieces in the puzzle, and it all went according to plan, smoothly. Not a lot of cross-examination, not a lot of areas of dispute, and very quickly.
Anthony Evans' legal team now prepares to present his defence.
I'm always pessimistic. My learned senior is always overly optimistic. It's not over till it's over, but so far we're pretty happy with how it's gone.
But the Dakin's close friend Glenys Mayton is concerned at the trial's progress.
You know, it just doesn't look good, Marius, and I'm so sorry. He's finished, yes, he's finished. You both felt quite positive about what Paul was doing, and that's why I say maybe he's got something to pull out of the hat during the defence. You know, I just hate the thought that he might get off even with manslaughter or insanity, you know, that the insanity plea will be accepted and he'll just be put away, and if it's at the Crown's pleasure, then he could be out any time, and he would never have really paid for what he's done. That's what hurts the most. He's not paying for what he's done.
Yeah, we certainly hope that there will be justice. We need the system to work for us, and put this bastard away so he can't hurt anybody else. And we hope this jury can see through the defence, that Anthony Evans was totally sane at the moment he committed this deed, and that he wasn't insane.
Well, yeah, the way I see it, he's my son. He's still got a life, and if we don't stick behind him, who's gonna?
Next time, the defence makes its case that Anthony Evans is insane.
Have you even looked at the police incident report?
No. How can that anything be anything but a reference to the other states of mind?
That scenario is ripe for a mental breakdown.
As witnesses pick apart his mental state, there's a risk the trial could be aborted.
The reality is that Anthony's been getting worse as the trial's gone along.
If found guilty, Anthony Evans faces a life sentence.
On Trial continues next week. And if you miss an episode, you can catch up on iView. Tomorrow, a shocking crime fuels tension in the investigating team as the case becomes more and more complex. In the superb police drama Taggart, 8:30 tomorrow night on ABC One.
Each year, thousands of criminal cases are heard in courts around Australia. Here, some of the most serious crimes are heard before judge and jury. This is where justice is done. Now, for the first time in Australia, cameras have been allowed to film a murder trial.
This is not a whodunit trial.
How can that be anything but a reference to the other statement?
I might not be allowed to believe in an afterlife, but defection is certainly not here.
What? All please stand.
On trial is Anthony Evans, 34-year-old mechanic from Perth, Western Australia. He stands accused of murdering Alana Dakin in November 2007.
And I was the last one of the family to talk to Alana.
Evans admitted killing his partner.
Basically, I killed her.
In the first stage of the trial, the prosecution introduced evidence about the brutal killing.
Sliced her neck twice.
They contend it was a murder set against a background of domestic violence and alcoholism.
She was irrational, she was aggressive.
She was intoxicated.
And she wanted vodka, she wanted alcohol.
Alana's family claims Evans was the aggressor.
I saw her black and blue.
She had an injury to the top of her head.
But Evans has pleaded not guilty due to insanity.
Anthony was a chronic schizophrenic.
I will need medical assistance.
He didn't know what the hell he was doing. He didn't know what the hell he should be doing.
The victim's family has a very different view.
That Anthony Evans was totally sane at the moment he committed this deed.
But as witnesses pick apart Anthony's mental state, there's a risk the trial could be aborted.
The reality is that Anthony's been getting worse as the trial's gone along.
If found guilty, Anthony Evans faces a life sentence.
How say you? Are you guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
This case is unusual because the question of sanity is a very live issue, and that is an issue where it is for the accused to prove on the balance of probabilities. It's the one defence in the law that's truly a defence.
Day 4. The defence case begins. They must convince the jury Anthony Evans was insane at the time of the killing. Parents Rod and Sandra watch from the public gallery with Anthony's new girlfriend.
From the time he was born, he was always a pretty active sort of a kid. All the way through primary school, he was almost described as probably the model student. As he got into high school, like a lot of kids that go to high school, he picked up a few bad habits, I suppose. So yeah, we had a few minor issues, but nothing out of the ordinary.
This is a normal middle-class family with 3 children, loving parents who have suddenly found themselves in this situation that they never saw coming. They never thought they'd be one of these people, their son facing a murder charge.
I mean, the whole bloody thing's a situation any parent would wish they never found themselves in, you know, so.
The first witness for the defence is Anthony's younger brother, Wayne Evans.
Now, Mr. Evans, when was it that you first noticed something different or unusual about Anthony?
From what I can remember, around about when I was 14, so...
So around about 1999, thereabouts.
About that.
And tell me what it was you noticed about Anthony.
Things like staring and going into trances and telling us that he was receiving messages from Oprah Winfrey.
Oprah, as in the talk show host.
That's correct. Warning him about satellites spying on all of us, and I would have to walk out of the room in these types of circumstances, and that's why I couldn't have friends around. It was too embarrassing.
Now, I'd like you to tell me about the stares. What is it that he would actually do?
His head would drop right down and his eyes would raise up, and he would just stare, and he would just fixate himself on you, and it was scary. It was intimidating.
How often would this happen?
It was almost like a pattern with Anthony. There would be good stages where he would be almost seem normal and have his life on track, and things would be going fine, and he would be able to hold down a job, and then all of a sudden there would be a turn and the stares and the trances would start. So I basically just call them the good stages and the bad stages, because you knew when he was going through a good stage, and you really knew when he was going through a bad stage.
I guess at the end of the day, you're looking at things and you're kind of thinking, well, I don't want anything to be wrong with my child, but on the other hand, you're kind of thinking, well, something's not quite right here as well.
While the Evans family struggled with Anthony's problems, they were struck by a tragedy.
Can you say anything about the impact from what you saw that the death of Anthony's brother had on Anthony?
I'm sorry, I wouldn't really be able to say Anthony specific. It was an extremely hard time for the entire family.
All right.
You know, we'd had to deal with something for so long with Anthony that we didn't understand, and to all of a sudden David dying, it just tore us apart because it was just something else that we had to go through.
I see. Now, if I can move you forward to 2007, what observations, if any, did you make about Anthony and Alana when you first met?
My immediate thought was, great, she's just as crazy as he is, was my thought, and was just immediately thinking another thing that we're going to have to deal with, basically.
Wayne was at his parents' house when Anthony arrived after killing Alana.
He was crying, but he was very calm at the same time.
Was he saying anything?
He told me that the police were going to be here soon. He told me that Alana's gone and he wants me to look after Mum and Dad.
Well, yeah, the way I see it, he's my son. He's still got a life, and if we don't stick behind him, who's gonna?
The defence must prove on the balance of probability that Anthony was insane at the time of the killing.
It's really important that the jury have an understanding, as best they can, with the assistance of the psychiatrist and the record of interview, of trying to work out whether he did in fact have a specific intent and was of sound mind at the time of the killing, or whether he was actually suffering a psychotic episode that deprived him of the capacity to form the requisite intent.
The first expert witness is Dr. Lester Walton, a senior Melbourne-based psychiatrist often called upon by legal teams.
This man's history of psychiatric relevance, if you like, dates back to when he was 5 years of age, where he was the victim of sexual abuse. However, that didn't come to light until about 10 years later. The next salient event was 1999. He's then, around about 23 years old, and he was the victim of assault, really. He sustained blows to his head. And the event was salient, and it seems that the family particularly noticed a change in his behaviour, and not at all unsensibly attributed it to the head injury, initially at least. And
Evans had a long history of hospitalisation, including an admission after the killing.
And he made an attempt at suicide. He cut his wrists and his neck, and especially the latter wound would suggest that it wasn't a trivial attempt.
The defence returns to the central evidence in the case, the record of interview Anthony gave police just hours after he killed Alana. Dr. Walton believes the first exchange indicates Evans was unbalanced.
Anything you do say will be recorded by the camera in these microphones. Okay. And the third part is that we can use this video recording in court against you. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Just so I know you understand, can I get you to repeat that in your own words?
Well, I can make a statement for myself that will cover that. I'm in severe shock, but as for understanding what I've been through, I'm going to need some, if it's available, some sort of medical guidance and counselling.
Certainly.
To explain what I've been through.
Okay.
I don't understand myself. Why I understand, but I'm very spiritual, but this is an experience for me.
All
and
right.
I mean, experiencing.
Okay, you're just getting a bit off track. I need you to talk to me about the caution.
it's a typical example of how he responds to questions. Very straightforward question. He seemed to understand that they went through. Can you repeat in your own words what it means? And he launches into this increasingly odd sort of discussion about spirituality and other things which obviously got nothing to do with whether or not he understands the process of being interviewed. Now that sort of thinking is an example of psychotic thought disorder.
What is psychosis?
Generally speaking, a psychotic illness, psychosis, is said to be characterised by the person being out of touch with reality. Schizophrenia would be the commonest psychotic illness, and it affects a whole range of a person's mental functioning, save there is usually relative sparing of intellectual capacity, that is intelligence and memory and things of that nature. So emotions, behaviour, thinking and perception all may be disturbed.
Earlier in the trial, the prosecution argued the murder was the culmination of escalating domestic violence. The defence argues very differently.
Can I ask you this? Is stress likely to exacerbate or bring on psychotic symptoms?
It's a very well established phenomenon that people with the illness, it's not the cause of it, but people who have the illness of schizophrenia, if they find themselves in emotionally charged or otherwise stressful circumstances, that may well precipitate a particular episode of psychosis.
So the violent and dysfunctional nature of the relationship as it was at the time of the killing, could that give rise to a stressful situation for him?
From a psychiatric perspective, that scenario is ripe for a mental breakdown or an acute psychotic episode.
At the time that you saw him, on the information that you had, did you form any opinion as to whether he was suffering from a specified mental illness?
My diagnosis is that of chronic schizophrenia.
And in those circumstances, is it likely, or more likely than not, that he was suffering from schizophrenia at the time of the killing?
In my opinion, it's probable that he was psychotic precisely at the time of the killing.
Your Honour, please, as that concludes the examination of the Chief.
The case rests on this key issue, whether Anthony was sane or not at the time of the killing.
I mean, the prosecution case is so centred on the interview, and each time I've watched it, I've got the personal impression that he was not psychotically thought disordered, that he was describing accurately and reliably events for which he is criminally responsible. But its interpretation, of course, is now what's central, and my job is to see that the propositions the defence psychiatrists are putting about the interview are fairly tested, and the jury are in the best position to make their own minds up about what was going on in Anthony's head.
The prosecution first challenges Dr. Walton's claim that Evans did not have the capacity to know the killing was wrong.
The ability to reason about whether something is right or wrong, about whether one ought to do something or not, encompasses more than simply one's own opinion, doesn't it?
Well, I understand the issue is whether the particular individual was capable of reasoning about the moral questions which should surround the killing. And I say no.
As the psychiatric evidence continues, the defence is concerned Evans is becoming distressed hearing about his mental illness.
Under our law, a person has to be mentally fit at the start of the trial, the end of the trial and during the trial. He's coping, his medication needs to be increased. But the reality is that Anthony's been getting worse as the trial's gone along and undoubtedly will continue to do so as the stress and anxiety increases.
Day 5. The prosecution continues to challenge Dr. Walton's psychiatric evidence. Focus turns to the weight Dr. Walton gives to Evans' repeated references to spirituality.
I'm in the spirit world, and I don't classify that as a mental illness. I'm a very spiritual person.
Well, I think that's starting to get a bit wacky, really, isn't it? This is a question about are you feeling tired, basically. I think that's a very abnormal response.
All right.
My main thing is just to do with tonight because I love the girl and I just want to feel justice in the afterlife, and I still want to be there for me when I get there. So
it's very, very unusual, my experience, to come across this kind of spontaneous comment by someone who's being interviewed by police. And he says, oh, hang on a minute. And he obviously gives this high priority, needs to tell them about it. Very, very odd. This is not something the police are interested in at all.
You say that the fact that he gives that thought process priority is evidence of psychosis?
It's consistent with it, yes.
It's not solely consistent with it, though, is it?
As argument continues about his sanity, Evans becomes uneasy in the dock.
It is odd behaviour. It is consistent with his being mentally disordered.
He signals time out to instructing solicitor Kate King.
The moral character of his act.
Sorry, sir, I think we'll just need a break. Now the accused man needs a short break.
Very well. We'll take the morning break somewhat early, ladies and gentlemen. You may stand down, Mr. Evans.
Your Honour, as I understand it, Dr. Pascoe was unable to communicate with the prison authorities, and accordingly his medication has not been updated. Oh, and I'm just told that he doesn't appear to be well at all, so can we have Dr. Pascoe go down to the cells and see him now?
All right, and when that's done, I think counsel had better see me in chambers.
Your Honour, please.
There is now serious doubt Evans is fit to continue the trial.
In broad terms and simple terms, an accused needs to have sufficient comprehension to be able to understand the trial, follow it, give instructions to counsel. If not, the trial would have had to have been aborted.
So look, whatever happens, you guys can be reassured it's not some thing on us or him. It's a very judgmental.
I'm well aware that you were all strongly motivated to have and finish the trial, as are we.
And we remain so. I do think what we may be able to do is to adjourn for the day, get his medication sorted. The problem is they don't medicate him during the day. So Hakea won't give him, it's not the security guard's fault, but they're not allowed to give him what he needs during the day. So he's on a much lower dosage in a much more stressful situation. Through the evidence that's been the case.
I can assure you that he's not feigning mental illness. I think anybody who observes him can see that he's got significant health problems.
Evans waits to be assessed in the holding cells.
You see the world as you think is reality, and all of a sudden someone tells you that your reality is delusional, it's weird, it's wacky, all of these words that were used by a fabulous psychiatrist who spoke in a way the jury could understand, but I think also spoke in a way that Anthony could understand, and it's very difficult for someone to be told that their reality is a deluded world of unreality.
Counsel are called to Justice McKechnie's chambers. If Evans is not fit to stand, the trial may be aborted.
I met with counsel in chambers and suggested would it be a better idea if he was able to be in a remote room with Dr. Pascoe, who has also treated him, and I think she also altered his medication.
Your Honour, I noticed that he is handcuffed, and I can tell you that that does cause him some distress. I saw him immediately before. There are security officers there, but I wonder whether he certainly wasn't handcuffed in court. Is there any reason why he needn't?
That is a less safe environment.
I appreciate that, Your
Your
Honour.
the charge and the fact that there are women present, I don't propose to have them removed.
Your Honour, please.
And check for me.
The prosecution resumes challenging Dr. Walton's psychiatric report. Focus turns to the record of interview held up as evidence of Evans' disordered thinking.
And you say, Mr. Evans is questioned about the clothing he was wearing, and he responds, I was wearing shorts and undies that are hanging up in the shower. I showered afterwards because I was in 2 states or 3 states of mind. One, I felt dirty and sick in a kind of way that I've never felt before, and the blood on me was making me feel like cleaning it off. You stop the quote at that point and you say, he does not elaborate on the other states of mind.
That's how I read it.
Let's see what Mr. Evans says.
The prosecution contends Dr. Walton misinterpreted what Evans was saying.
Three states of mind. One, I felt dirty and sick in a kind of way that I've never felt before, and the blood on me was making me feel like getting it off. 2, I had contemplated, because I've worked so hard in my life up until meeting Alana, I contemplated trying to cover it up.
Seeing and reading that passage, it is absolutely clear that he explicitly elaborates on at least one of his other states of mind, isn't it?
Only one.
Well, explicitly, 2, I contemplated covering up because I've worked so hard and so on.
You figure that was one of his states of mind that he's elaborating on?
Yes.
And as far as I'm concerned, he really only talks about one.
Dr. Walton, with respect, how can that be? He says, 1, I felt dirty and sick in a kind of way.
That's right.
2, I contemplated, because I worked so hard in my life until meeting Alana, I contemplated trying to cover it up somewhere. How can that be anything but?
Well, that's not really a state of mind, but...
Well, I suggest to you, Doctor, that the point that you made, it is he's asked a question about what he was wearing, he answers that question, then he goes off on a complete tangent.
Inappropriately, in my view.
He identifies the clothing and where it now is.
That's right. That's all he needed to say.
Not precluded from saying anything else.
Absolutely not.
All right.
He carries on spontaneously, that's the point.
He carries on spontaneously to explain why they're in the shower, because he showered afterwards, because he was in 2 or 3 states of mind.
Your Honour, I do object. Your Honour, these are points that can be made by way of final address. Obviously, my learned friend's got to put the specific passages and the propositions that he contends for. But tin for tack, the way we're going at the moment, is inappropriate in my submission.
I don't consider it's yet reached the point where it has become overly repetitious. However, there does come a point when the rule in Brown and Dunn has been amply complied with, and I think we've reached that point.
Look, I agree that, piece by piece, you have to be careful about any individual bit. The bit I would emphasise is, on the one hand, he's asked a very straightforward, concrete question, which he answers, and then there's this rapid transition into other stuff. And I would say that's consistent with abnormality of thinking.
As Your Honour pleases.
Thank you, Dr. Walton. You're free to go.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll let you go. My personal advice is not to think about this case over the weekend.
As the court adjourns for the weekend, Evans is taken to a maximum security psychiatric hospital where his condition can be monitored. Week 2. There is still no certainty Evans is in a fit state to complete the trial.
They've doubled his medication, so they wanted to keep him in for at least 48 hours just to see whether there were any side effects and whether the medication at that dose was working. But we're hopeful that we'll be able to proceed again today.
The defence prepares to call its second expert witness, senior psychiatrist Dr. Vicky Pascu.
Of all the 3 experts, she's had the most contact with Anthony and she's treated him for the longest period of time.
I'm not here for Mr. Anthony Evans, and I don't go to court for the person per se, but we go there because of the illness, so we are really there to advocate for the illness itself.
Dr. Pascu made a psychiatric assessment of Evans' condition after the killing.
What about this as a theory? Anthony and Alana had a volatile relationship which became more aggressive, there was more violence, and on the night in question, she pushed him too far and stabbed her. And he did that while perfectly sane, perfectly aware of what he was doing, with all his capacities intact. Why is that not?
In my view, I don't think it's likely to be the case because we know that this man has a history of psychosis. So it's almost not taking Mr. Evans in his totality, it's choosing, like in a tunnel vision manner, to just focus on a dysfunctional relationship.
So what is your opinion as to whether or not Anthony Evans was in a psychotic state at the time he commenced to stab the victim?
In my view, he was experiencing psychosis at the time.
At the time of what?
At the time, and very likely even before the final wounding. Yep.
Yes, thank you. I've got no further questions.
The prosecution must again challenge the expert opinion.
It is a big challenge to communicate technical evidence, particularly contested technical evidence. There's no point in scoring, goals in cross-examination if the jury doesn't understand them. So, I try and use ordinary words. I try and use short sentences. I don't by any means always succeed, as you will have seen in the court, and I just take my time.
The prosecution focuses on the interpretation of Anthony's claim that Alana challenged him to stab her.
But then in the heat of the moment it became clear to me that I had some kind of, it was not like a thought to stab her, it was more like a challenge, not by me but by her, or do it then.
What auditory hallucinations do you say this passage suggests?
I think that I would have asked him, did anybody tell you to do it then? Or what do you mean by do it then?
Isn't it self-evident what that means, Dr. Pascoe?
Well, I wouldn't go that far to say that it's self-evident.
Isn't Mr. Evans simply saying Alana challenged him to stab her?
Well, we don't know if Alana actually said it, do it then, or was it a voice which sounded like Alana, who could have said it, do it then? We don't know.
Thank you.
Mr. Yovich, is it your intention to call evidence in response?
It is, Your Honour.
I think we'll do that tomorrow morning. It's been a long day for everyone.
Yes. All right, Your Honour.
At the end of day 6, the defence case is over.
Will please stand.
Quite frankly, one assumes as good as it's ever going to get for the defence, not because it's been good or bad, but just because the only witness left is someone who's being called on behalf of the prosecution, who clearly is going to give an opinion that's contrary to that expressed by both of our psychiatrists. But we're very happy with how the evidence has come out. I think it's come out fairly, and I hope at least very clearly, particularly today.
But Alana's parents are concerned at the progress of their daughter's murder trial.
And we have mixed feelings at the moment. It could go either way, but it looks as if it may go the opposite way to what we would like.
The prosecution prepares to present its own psychiatric expert.
So far, the defence have had 3 days' worth of psychiatric evidence from eminent people saying that the accused was legally insane, and we need to put the alternative hypothesis and the expert evidence that supports it.
Yes, Mr. Yovich.
Consulting psychiatrist Dr. Adam Brett has spent 3 days listening to the defence psychiatrists. He has a very different diagnosis of Evan's condition.
First of all, did you come to the conclusion that the accused man suffered from some mental impairment?
I concluded that the diagnosis wasn't clear, but the differential diagnosis was between schizotypal disorder and what we call psychotic disorder not otherwise specified.
Now, what is a differential diagnosis?
It means that the evidence is not black and white, and that there are different possibilities of what the diagnosis could be. So it's really saying I've got an open mind as to what the diagnosis is.
So in this case, what hypotheses did you consider?
That Mr. Evans was acutely psychotic at the time of the offence, and that the offence was driven by psychosis as one.
What conclusion did you reach about that hypothesis?
I didn't think that was the most rational one, or the most likely one, sorry.
Go on, and other scenarios?
The other scenario was this was what we'd call a normal murder. So this was a murder in the context of domestic violence, emotional upset, and alcohol use.
And what did you consider in relation to that hypothesis?
I believe that likely scenario was more likely than the previous one.
All right. And for the purpose of determining what his mental state was at the time of the killing, obviously we have all referred regularly to his police interview a few hours later.
Yeah.
And you've heard the evidence of both Dr. Walton and Dr. Pascoe that they assessed Mr. Evans's presentation in that interview as psychotically thought disordered.
Yep.
Do you share that conclusion?
No.
So, Dr. Brett, what is your conclusion about the accused's capacity to know he ought not kill Alana at the time that he did it?
Firstly, I think he's got significant mental health problems, but I think at the time of the offence, he was not deprived of any of the capacities outlined in the criminal code, and specifically to know that the act was wrong.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Brett. That's the evidence in chief of the witness.
Our strategy in cross-examining Dr. Brett ultimately will be to try and get him to concede that there are differences of opinion and that ultimately whatever opinion he has expressed might be quite wrong. If we can get him to concede that much, then we're in with a real fighting chance. I think you said right at the beginning of your evidence, but it was something like, I have an open mind as to the diagnosis of his mental illness.
Yep.
Do you still have an open mind?
Yeah.
Do you accept that your diagnosis, your provisional diagnosis of schizotypal disorder with psychosis NOS may in fact be wrong?
Yes.
Do you also accept that the diagnosis given by both Drs Pascu and Dr Walton, that at all relevant times Anthony Evans has been suffering from schizophrenia, may in fact be correct?
Yes.
If he was suffering from schizophrenia at all relevant times, then that would be very important, wouldn't it, at the time of the killing, in terms of determining whether he was or was not psychotic at the relevant time?
No, the diagnosis is irrelevant.
Well, you've told us already that stressful situations have a particular correlation to a person suffering from schizophrenia.
No, I didn't say that.
What did you say?
I said that stress can precipitate psychosis in somebody with schizophrenia.
All right. So if at the time of the killing Anthony Evans was in fact suffering from chronic schizophrenia, then stress could have precipitated psychosis.
Yes.
And there's no doubt, is there, on any view, that the 3-week period leading up to the killing had the capacity to be extremely stressful.
Yes.
We know, don't we, that although it was a 6-month relationship, the 3 weeks leading up to the killing involved what's been generally called in this court domestic violence.
Yep.
But on each of the identified incidents put forward by the prosecution, the aggressor was Alana Dakin.
Yep.
We know also that she was a chronic alcoholic.
Yep.
Who was uncooperative and abusive whenever police attended.
I don't know that, but I expect so.
Have you even looked at the police incident reports in respect of each of these domestic violence incidents?
No.
Why not?
I haven't been given them.
But your hypothesis, Dr. Brett, as I understand it, is that this can all be explained away by a domestic violence situation unrelated to psychotic behaviour.
Yes.
And so, with that hypothesis, you therefore exclude as a reasonable possibility that he was schizophrenic and psychotic at the relevant time?
No.
No, you don't. So he might have been schizophrenic and psychotic at the relevant time?
Not on the evidence available to me.
All right. So it's a difference of opinion?
Yes.
Yes, I've got nothing further, thank you, Your Honour.
After 7 days, the prosecution and defence prepare to make their closing addresses. It's their last chance to sway the opinion of the jury.
I mean, the night before you close, however well prepared you are, you're always got a lot to absorb and collate and collect and decide what you want to say to the jury. You want to be thorough but not go overboard so that you bore them to sleep. The first question you have to decide, it being clear that the accused unlawfully caused Alana Dakin's death, is, was he of sound mind? Every one of the expert witnesses accepts that Anthony Evans suffers from a mental illness of some kind. They don't all attach the same label to it. And crucially, they don't agree.
The jury must first decide whether Evans was insane or not at the time of the killing.
Before the accused can be found guilty of murder, he has to have actually had the intention to do grievous bodily harm to Alana Dakin. And the prosecution would say to you that that element is amply and overwhelmingly established by what the accused did and what he said. The striking of that final blow can have had no other purpose than the infliction of a fatal, a life-threatening at least, wound.
If the jury finds Evans was sane, it must then move to a second crucial question of provocation.
Now, provocation can operate to make what would otherwise be murder into manslaughter. There can be no doubt in this case that there was a heightened state of emotion, that there were, among the emotions going through Anthony Evans's and Alana Dakin's, for that matter's, mind on the night was anger. But, ladies and gentlemen, is there anything Alana Dakin did on that night that would cause an ordinary person, an ordinary sane person in this circumstance, to lose their self-control to the extent of killing her? Can that possibly be justified in the circumstances? The prosecution would say no way. I have no doubt that the attention you've paid to this trial and the sincerity and the seriousness with you have taken and dealt with these serious issues will lead you to the right answer. May it please, Your Honour.
Tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, you'll hear from Mr Edwardson, and then I'll direct you, I imagine, at some stage tomorrow you will go out, 12 of you, to consider your verdict. For tonight, good night, see you in the morning.
At the end of the day, Anthony is briefed by solicitor Kate King.
No, it's up to us to do a strong closing.
Hopefully Mr Edwardson will...
He will. I certainly feel a sense of responsibility towards him, and I'd certainly like to get a very good result for him. And I know the family very well and the family's friends. But again, you can't let that cloud your professional judgments. First thing tomorrow morning, we'll do our closing. Now, our closing is going to be quite different to theirs. It's a lot shorter. It's about 45 minutes. We're just going to deal with the main issues that have arisen at trial and keep it quite short and punchy.
Day 8. It is the last chance for the defence to convince the jury that Anthony Evans was insane at the time of the killing.
In Western Australia, traditionally, juries don't like insanity. In fact, in other states, and certainly where I come from, generally you wouldn't have a jury. A judge would decide that issue. But the real issue, the ultimate issue for the jury in this case will of course be the question of whether he was of sound mind at the time of the killing. That's what the case is really all about. What is ultimately the difference in our cases is what was in Anthony's head at the time that he ended Alana's life. The prosecution would tell you that despite the fact that Anthony was mentally ill, despite the fact that he didn't actually want her dead, and despite the fact that he desperately loved her and wanted to help her, he brutally and intentionally chose to inflict life-threatening injuries. What we say is that while Anthony ended Alana's life, he did not do so with intent to seriously harm her, and it is more probable than not that he was legally insane at that time. Doctors Pascoe and Walton described that shortly after the killing, Anthony was delusional in his thinking, and in their opinion, their expert opinion, he exhibited clear signs of thought disorder. The reality is there is no evidence, we suggest, which is capable of establishing that Anthony ever intended to cause grievous bodily harm to Alana. In fact, you might even think that causing any harm to her was the very last thing that he ever would have wanted. Whatever you might make of the evidence in this case, to quote Dr. Walton, Anthony said things that were really quite wacky and weird. The fact is, Anthony had been saying and doing wacky and weird things for close on a decade. Symptoms that we would all recognise as signs of madness. The crime of murder is reserved for the most serious criminal offending known to us all. It is reserved for those who genuinely have murderous intent. It is not reserved, I suggest, for those who are disabled by confused and disturbed thinking caused by an acknowledged mental illness. Whatever you decide in this case, Anthony Evans is not guilty of murder, either because he was legally insane or because the appropriate charge that reflects his criminal culpability is one of manslaughter. Your Honour, please.
Thank you, Mr. Edwardson. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the point of the trial where the evidence is over,
The addresses of council are over. There's one last thing before 12 of you retire, and that is for me to give you directions on the law. The first issue for the jury really is, has the accused established that he was insane at the time? If they say yes to that he has established it, then they would return a verdict of not guilty on the grounds of unsoundness of mind. That is a special verdict which would lead to me making a custody order which would have him detained for treatment and so forth. If they didn't reach that conclusion, then the issue would be whether he was guilty of murder, that is, an unlawful killing with intention to do grievous bodily harm, which he of course disputes, or whether he was guilty of manslaughter. He doesn't dispute that he is guilty of manslaughter. So, in a sense, the real battle is whether the state can satisfy the jury beyond reasonable doubt, A, that he had that intention at the time he killed her, and B, that he was not provoked into doing so. And I'd ask you now to retire and consider your verdict. We'll send the exhibits up in due course.
What we're really hoping is that for the jury to see through all the evidence and they find Anthony guilty and totally in control of his faculties at the time that he committed the act. Guilty of murder. Mm. Guilty of murder. In our hearts we know he was in total control.
I'm not a trained psychiatrist, so I don't have a qualification to say. In the lead up to what took place and the incident that took place, I believe Anthony was very confused. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. He didn't know what the hell he should be doing.
Okay, I won't build my hopes up and ask for any possible thoughts on how things will go.
Yeah, look, it's a bit too early to say. We anticipate they'll be out for a little while. They've got a lot of evidence to think about. Okay.
I've been trying not to look at them because I don't want to come across as intimidating anyone or trying to influence anyone.
I know, it's
all the facts are there, so I might not be allowed to believe in an afterlife, but perfection's certainly not here.
No, I know. It's been difficult. His Honour indicated to them today that he will send them home overnight. He won't make them stay in a hotel. So deliberations may run into Thursday, okay? It may not be quick.
Thanks for everything you've done anyway. I appreciate it, and no matter what happens, I think I'm happy that the best has been done.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah. We've done our very best for you.
I know sometimes I seem a little bit unappreciative, but
no, you haven't. It's a very stressful situation.
I do have an untreated mental illness, which I'm still trying to get to the bottom of.
I know. You've done a great job.
I'm fighting the legal system, which I know why they get you to swear on the Bible now, because I swear the prosecutor's the devil.
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand it's been very stressful, but you've done a great job. So just a few more days. Okay, thanks, Anthony.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
As you know, because it's murder, there has to be a unanimous verdict, so there's no majority verdict in this case. Realistically, where there's been so much emphasis on a 2-hour record of interview, and the judge has made it plain that they should have serious regard to that interview and the differing opinions that have been expressed by the psychiatrists about that interview and what it means and so on, I'd be very, very surprised if we have a verdict tonight.
You wouldn't even try and take a guess, but if I had to guess, I'd say late tomorrow afternoon sometime. But who knows? They might come in the morning and say, oh, we've got a decision. You don't know.
There's no decision by early evening. The jury is released for the night. Day 9. Counsel can do nothing but wait for the verdict.
You initially feel quite optimistic, particularly we had a very good charge from the judge. We were feeling really good. 24 hours goes past, you're fairly sleep deprived and you're feeling less good. But yeah, I think we all just want it resolved today. We certainly don't want to be going through this again tomorrow.
To be honest, I don't really have any idea. I haven't got the experience to even make a guesstimate.
They could be working in a sort of orderly and cooperative way towards a conclusion, or they could be on divergent paths. If you've got, you know, a block of jurors going one way, another block going another way, then things can take ages.
But the prosecution is increasingly pessimistic about getting a murder conviction.
I think the most likely verdicts are either not guilty on the grounds of unsoundness of mind or guilty of manslaughter. Before the addresses, I would have said that a murder verdict was more likely than a manslaughter verdict, and that could still be what they do, so we'll see.
At 12:30, a message from the foreman.
We've got a question, I'll bring it up.
The jury asks for clarification on the issue of provocation.
With regard to provocation, can you please explain the significance of mental illness, intoxication, medication, drugs, etc., when applying the ordinary person test? Mr. Yavich, yesterday, what would you like me to tell them?
Well, Your Honour, what I would propose that you tell them is that...
After legal teams make submissions, the judge calls the jury back to advise them. If they have decided Evans was sane, they could now be debating whether he is guilty of murder or the reduced charge of manslaughter.
It's very difficult to know whether it's a question that's posed by one person or more, where it fits in the scheme of things. It could be good, it could be bad. What they're actually thinking, I have no idea.
My theory was if they came back with a verdict within about 10 minutes of the lunch break, the judge said he wouldn't take a verdict from 1 till 2. If they came back with a verdict pretty much straight after, we were stuffed. But if they took longer, which they now have, then it's less likely that what David's just said, got to that point where they've excluded everything else and there's just this one little question left hanging. So if another half an hour goes past, I'll be feeling slightly happier again.
But minutes later, word comes through. The jury has made a decision.
What's happening now?
We've got a verdict. This is the worst bit. What's going through my mind? Anything but murder. I'm not happy they've got a verdict yet. I mean, practically I am, but it's too close after the question to make me very worried. Yeah.
Verdict. So, this is where it's all get. Does that question they ask give you some comfort? I'm always hesitant about drawing too many adverse or too many conclusions from jury questions. It's ostensibly a positive sign for us, but I won't be betting the house on it.
I hope the verdict will come back guilty. That would be justice. Unfortunately, I think that there's a high probability that that's not going to happen, that he'll be found insane.
Court, all please stand.
Mr. Evans remains standing. Bring back the jury.
Mr. Foreman and members of the jury, are you agreed upon your verdict?
Yes, we are.
How say you, is the accused guilty or not guilty?
Guilty of murder.
And is that the verdict of you all?
It is the verdict as we saw.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the community, I would like to thank you for the care and attention which you have obviously paid over the last few weeks. This has not been a pleasant or an easy trial. Thank you on behalf of the community, and you are discharged and free to go. And we will adjourn pro tem.
Please stand. The Honourable Court now stands adjourned pro tem.
Outside, Jane Mayton breaks the news to Alana's parents.
Hey, guilty. We got guilty. No worries, you do that. Give him my love. Bye. He's wrapped. He's wrapped.
The court resumes shortly afterwards to hear sentencing submissions.
Your Honour, Anthony Evans has specifically asked me to put something to you in his words. He said, I want the judge to know that I'm going to be a model prisoner. I want him to tell me in language I can understand what I need to do so I can be released when I've served my time. Your Honour, this is a case where we would respectfully submit that the minimum term is appropriate.
The state would not seek to urge upon Your Honour the setting of a minimum term substantially in excess of the 10-year minimum. We would say that there are features of this offence that make it more serious. The killing itself was a brutal act. The infliction of the 2 non-fatal wounds makes the offending more serious, albeit that they, like the infliction of the fatal wound, need to be seen in the context of the dysfunction in the relationship and the existence of Mr. Evans's mental impairment.
Shortly after submissions, the judge proceeds with sentencing.
A little over an hour ago, you were convicted by a jury in a unanimous verdict of murder. And so you now stand to be sentenced. The wounds you inflicted on that night on her were brutal, and you had the intention to cause her grievous bodily harm. I am satisfied, in fact, that your illness played a part in the overall mixture of those things that caused you to commit this crime, even though it fell short of making you legally insane. You are going to be sentenced to a term of imprisonment for life. That means what it says, because this crime of murder is such that no other sentence is appropriate. When the time comes, you will do yourself the most good about trying to get released if you have been, as you have said you will be, a model prisoner, if you have demonstrated in the time that you are not violent and that your mental illness is under control. Now, will you stand? You are sentenced to a term of imprisonment for life. I set a minimum term of 11 years before you are eligible for consideration for parole. I direct that the sentence take effect from the 13th of November 2007. You may stand down and the court will adjourn.
Will please stand. The Honourable Court now stands adjourned for back to be.
I think it's a very disappointing verdict. I mean, you've got to be objective about these things. I just think it's really unfortunate when you've got such a troubled soul who clearly is mentally ill, and you've got so many doctors who think that he was not legally sane at the time of the killing. But at the end of the day, that's the jury verdict.
Because this is such a tragic case, I don't feel any sense of triumph at the verdict. There's a vindication of the prosecution case, and that's professionally satisfying, but that's sort of dwarfed by the tragedy of the events. The criminal justice system deals with, events in which there are no winners.
Jane Matten clutches a token reminder of her murdered best friend Alana Dakin, declaring today justice was served.
No time will be enough time to keep him in jail, in our opinion. We're happy to have seen justice done today. And life.
His family say it's been a tough journey.
My family have stood by my brother for the past several years with all of the ordeal that we've had to go through, and we'll continue to stand by him.
Evans was today sentenced to life imprisonment but could be eligible for parole in 8 years' time. In sentencing, Justice McKechnie said their relationship was doomed from the beginning. Although Evans was suffering a mental illness, the killing was brutal. He knew what he was doing and he knew it was wrong.
Next time, now cameras have been allowed inside a district court.
And then he said, "We want your wallet." And then, well, I got a hit in the face.
But the accused claims he wasn't even there.
He says he didn't rob this taxi driver.
The only evidence against him is a smear of DNA found on the taxi driver's shirt.
Evidence is evidence.
How did it get there?
But you're not sure whether you breached police procedure on this occasion or not, do you?
Join us for the series final of On Trial next week. And on Sunday, tensions are high as radical students and protests are the backdrop to murder when Inspector George Gently investigates. 8:30 Sunday night on ABC1.